Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and I do appreciate that immensely. I also love it when people leave comments, so if you have a question about the video, some constructive criticism, you want to suggest a video, you want to tell me how you do things, or you just want to say hi, those are all great things, and I love to hear those comments, so feel free. So one of the things I've never really done on my channel is talk about how to decorate bezels and kind of jazz them up in some way. And so I have a few different methods of doing that, and I thought I'd show those to you today. I picked out a little spiny oyster stone, and I cut some pieces of bezel for that. And I think what I'll do is, like I did with the crown setting the other day, and I finalized the vote on that one, by the way. It's going to be the number 3 in a ring, so I'll come up with that and post that on my community page. This one I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to let you pick which one of these bezels I should use for the stone, and then I'll make something out of it with that bezel. So leave your vote on which one it is in the comment section, and I'll remind you at the end of the video which one is, we'll call one number 1, and one number 2, number 3, number 4, and we'll do it that way. So before we do that, though, I wanted to thank some groups of people. My patrons on Patreon are my core group of supporters. Cindy F., thank you for signing up. I really hope that you find, like I have, that group of people over there is a super nice group with a lot of knowledge and very friendly. It's a great place with a lot of nice people. So thank you to my patrons for creating such a nice environment over there. I really appreciate it. The other group is my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 19,200. And we're rapidly approaching 20,000, which is amazing. Thank you for that, and thanks for the nice comments, as well as the super thanks and the buy me a coffees. Those things really help with the rising cost of materials. All right, well, let's do some different kinds of bezel decoration. This is one of my design idea sketchbooks you can get over on my merch store. This particular one has a nice convenient fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeter conversion chart on the back. Some of the other ones have some different charts. One is American wire gauge, 2 inches to millimeters. I find both of those ones very useful, and there's a few others. The most useful thing, though, is you can draw up your designs in it, and it's got this nice grid pattern in the background that I like a lot. It helps me to keep my drawings kind of symmetrical. So I'm not doing so much a particular project today as showing you some different ways to decorate bezels and how I do it. And so here's the different things that I jotted down. One way that I used to do a lot is soldering on little fine wire designs on the outside, and I chose some little circles to show you the basic idea, but you wouldn't have to do little circles. I think I'm going to use some 22 gauge round wire, and we'll solder those on there like that. Another way is to run your bezel through a rolling mill. This bezel, where I'm soldering on some designs, I'm going to use very thin stuff, and I'm not going to solder it near the top so that I have some ability to bend that over the top of the curve of the stone there. So I'm going to use 28 gauge, which is 0.33 millimeters. The rest of these I'm going to use slightly thicker stuff, which is 0.41 millimeters or 26 gauge. And that's because I'm going to impress some stuff into them. So this one here, I'm going to use a rolling mill to put a pattern into the side. I have some stamps, and we can do a couple of different kinds of stamps to give it some decoration like that. And this one is just going to be hand textured using my chasing hammer. So we'll give those a try. I think probably we'll start with, let's start with just we'll go backwards here. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, and 4, like that. So we'll start by hand texturing something. I pre-cut a few of these. I need to make sure I get one of the thicker ones. So I really like the kind of texture that the edge of my chasing hammer puts on stuff. So I thought I'd try it. I've never actually done this on a bezel, but I think it'll look good. We'll see. I'm not going to hit it super hard. The bezel that I use is made out of fine silver, so it's a little bit softer than sterling silver. And what I like to do when I use this kind of a texture is I use the very edge of the chasing hammer. So I'm just going to kind of gently Give it kind of a vertical texture like that. This is probably because I'm flattening it a little bit while I'm doing this. It's going to stretch it out a bit, so I may need to cut it shorter again after I get it all textured how I want. And you can do that as densely or as sparsely as you want, I suppose. They also make texture hammers that I have one, and it has some different heads on it that you can do different things with. I've not been hugely impressed with how those work, but every once in a while you find a use for one. So now we got a nice kind of vertical going texture. I like that. I think that'll be kind of nice. So that's one thing you can do. So let's grab another one here, and let me find some stamps and see what we got. I forgot I never showed you the stone I was making these bezels for. It's a little purple spiny oyster. Oh, let's see how much longer this is now, if any. Yeah, a couple of millimeters longer, so I'll have to cut that off. Actually, let's just cut it off right now so I don't forget. That's presupposing I measured it right the first time. Okay, we'll set that one to the side. I may want to anneal that to soften it back up before I make it into an actual bezel. So I have some stamps here. Let's do something different on this one. My stamping abilities leave something to be desired sometimes, so apologies if I do a messy job on this, but oops, see, I got that one crooked. Interesting. So when I stamped the bottom, it stretched it out on the bottom a little bit, and so let's see if we can just use the chasing hammer to flatten it back out this way again a bit. Yeah, we'll see. So another thing you can do, if you have some letter and number stamps, you could put a kind of a message on the side of your bezel if you wanted to. I pre-did one here. Like this one I did. A lot of people like to put positive messages on their jewelry, and I think that's a nice thing to do. You could put love or hope or whatever kind of message you want to, something a little, sassy or whatever. But I think that makes for a nice place to display a message if you want to. And there's certainly a certain market for that kind of stuff, so that's one as well. All right, so let's go to the rolling mill and roll this through. Let me make sure I got the right one. Okay. This one's the 26 gauge. So let's go over to the rolling mill and we'll run it through with a texture plate and see how it looks. So when I tried this earlier, I had my rolling mill too tightly pressed together, and I squished the bezel too much, so I backed it off just a little bit. And I'm just going to put it through with this brass texture plate. So there, now we got a nice little pattern on there we can jazz up our piece with. Okay, and finally, let's do some soldered on designs, but I need to make some very little circles out of this 22 gauge. I should mark that down right here that I'm using 22 gauge. You could use different kinds of wire. If you start to get too much thicker than this, you may have a little trouble bending your bezel because it's going to stiffen it up significantly. 22 gauge is 0.66 millimeters. That's round wire. I think it's 0.66 if I remember right. So let's set this to the side and let's find a way to make some very small circles. One thing you can do, if you want really tiny ones, is you could wrap it around a piece of 14 gauge wire. Let me see if I can find a bit of 14 gauge round. You could use a bail making pliers or whatever way you make jump rings. I just find if I want little tiny ones, this is a good way to wrap them around another piece of wire. See if we can cut off some decent rings. You can use your saw if you prefer doing that with this kind of stuff. This is going to require some little delicate soldering, so we're going to cut some very small pieces of solder so we don't get a lot of slop. This would be great pick soldering practice maybe for you. If you haven't seen my pick soldering video, it's a great technique to learn if you want to ramp up your skills. Okay, I think that's probably enough, but if we can always cut some more if we need to. Let me find my pliers. So these are starting to get to be down at the size where I need a couple of pairs of pliers to manipulate them because my fingers are too big. So I'm going to close these all up. So I think if you do decide to vote on which one you like, let's call this one 1, 2, 3, and 4. So normally when I solder a bezel closed, I solder it on the outside. Now this would be one of those situations where I'm going to solder the bezels closed on the inside to try and prevent some excess solder from flowing into the patterns on the outside. We don't want a big globby spot on our bezel. People would laugh and make fun of us. We don't want that. These are so small, I'm going to point all of the solder joints towards me. That way I just know where they're at since I can barely see them. Alright, so let me find the solder. If you've never been to my channel before, I use primarily hard silver sheet solder. And so I'm going to cut some little tiny pieces out of this. I also use like a dribble on flux that I pour on with a dropper bottle. My torch is a Silversmith model. It's their acetylene air torch. It just pulls in atmospheric air to mix with the acetylene there. It's a great torch. It's a little bit hotter than a propane torch, so it's nice and it's got a good temperature for silver work. I think it's a great torch. So I'm going to move this out of the way so I don't light it on fire. That wouldn't be the first time I'd done something like that. So the solder I'm going to attach to these rings right now is probably going to be adequate to solder it right to the bezel too. So I'll close the ring itself, and then that'll leave enough solder on there hopefully to stick it down when I reheat it on top of the bezel. And so let's cut these off. These are pretty small pieces, so let's set these over here. There's not much metal on these things, so it doesn't take much to melt them, so you gotta be quick and dirty. We'll start back here and work our way forwards. Why don't we? So that one jumped to one side of the gap on it. Oops. That one's a loss. Just mark that one down too. Alright, we'll let those cool for a sec. I think let's get this fluxed. Let me guess, I'm one short. I've done zigzags on the side of bezels before, made out of wire. They're kind of wavy. Very quick, make one more. Shouldn't have melted that one, I had just the right amount. That's pretty good. Now we just need to reheat it enough to where that bottom piece reaches soldering temperature, which in this case is 1450 degrees, so that all those other ones stick to it. You want to be careful not to overheat the rings while you're trying to get that bottom piece up to temperature. So I'm kind of like going to where the bezel sticks out a little bit and heating over there. and moving it around constantly. Let's cool that off and make sure they're all on there. So I pick them pretty hard with your fingernails. So let's solder these all closed. Let me make sure these are still the right length. That one I cut off. I just need to file the end a little bit. That one's significantly longer than it was. So let's make a mark and cut that one off. So like I said, normally I do these things on the outside. But in this case, we're going to do it on the inside. And we'll clean up any solder mess that's in there. You really don't want a huge amount of solder flowing to the outside here, like I said, because then you'll get a little burp in your pattern. And when you solder them like this on the pad, the outside edge doesn't get too much heat. So in order to get it to fully penetrate that seam though, once I get it to flow, I may tip it over and then heat from the outside just a little tiny bit to get it to barely pull through. Does that make sense? So solder has a tendency to go towards the hot spot. If it seems like I need to anyway. Very good. I may have to retexture that outside a little bit right there. I had a little excess come through. Alright, so I will get those shaped and stuff, and I'll shine them up a little bit so we can have a nice thumbnail for the thing. But make sure to vote about which one you like. Again, let's call the texture hammer one number 1. The stamped one, even though it's not little asterisks, it's actually little kind of radiant things. That'll be number 2. Number 3 is the rolling mill one. And number 4 is the soldered on designs. So, and whichever one gets the most votes, I'll make a piece out of it with this this spiny oyster. So I'll get those cleaned up and I'll shape them into the shape of the stone, and we'll take some pictures. So again, that's just a few ways you can decorate bezels. I'm sure there's innumerable other ones, and I'm curious to hear if you've done any kind of bezel decoration yourself, and if you have, what kind of method did you use? I'm always curious about those kinds of things, so let me know. All right. Hey, well, that was a few different ways to decorate your bezel. If you enjoyed that, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. And I'd love it if you'd take a moment and go over to my main channel page. I have 450 plus videos now, and I've been doing this for 3 years on YouTube with about 3 videos per week. And so there's a huge collection of content over there, and there's almost certainly something else you'll find interesting and useful. So please feel free to watch some videos. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the video description down below. There's some important links, including a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that community, a link to my newest ebook, which is a guide to last year's videos. So there's a page for each of 170 plus videos that I did last year, with extra information about each project and links right to the video. So it's a useful tool to put a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips, and a nice way to support my channel. So get yourself one of those. There's also a link to my merch store if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea books I talked about at the beginning. I find those super useful and a great way to keep track of your past projects in case you want to revisit them again. So, all right, well, thanks for coming by. Take care. Happy silversmithing.